The morning sunlight touched the skyline of Seattle, glittering across the calm waters near the harbor, yet inside Emily Carter, everything felt stormy and heavy. She stood near the edge of Green Lake Park, clutching her old handbag tightly, the same bag she had carried through one too many disappointments. The world around her looked peaceful, children racing their scooters, an elderly couple walking their golden retriever, and fresh dew shining like pearls over the green grass. But her heart felt nothing but ache. It had been the worst week of her life, losing her small apartment after missing 2 rent payments, and then losing her part-time cashier job because the store was cutting staff. She washed her face behind gas station sinks, slept sitting upright at bus stops when security didn't push her away, and told herself she just had to survive one more day. But one more day had begun to feel like a lifetime. Her legs trembled with exhaustion as she sat down on a wooden park bench, watching cars rush by on the nearby road, buses hissing as they braked, motorcycles roaring impatiently at the traffic light, business people hurrying across crosswalks with coffees in hand. The world seemed to move forward, while she remained painfully still. Emily wasn't always like this. She had dreams once, big ones. She studied early childhood education and wanted to open a small daycare, somewhere warm and cheerful, filled with stories, plants, and kindness. But dreams had faded behind overdue bills, loneliness, and a slow drowning in hopelessness. Her phone battery had died 2 days ago. No internet, no applications, no one to call. She pressed her palm against her forehead, breathing shallowly, whispering to herself, "Just don't cry in public again." But tears didn't listen. She blinked them away quickly as voices from a nearby playground floated in the air. She forced herself to stand again and walked slowly toward the bus stop at the corner, not because she had anywhere to go, but because sitting still made her remember everything she had lost. An older man in a blue coat was waiting there, reading a newspaper. Beside him, 2 students were arguing playfully over baseball scores. A heavy traffic bus screeched to a halt, its doors unfolding with a sigh. People stepped inside with purpose, people who had destinations, people who belonged somewhere. She had nowhere, and that hopelessness, that quiet, suffocating invisibility, was the moment her life was about to collide with a stranger she had never met, someone who would notice what no one else had. Her pain, just as she turned away from the bus stop, dizzy with hunger, her knees buckled, and the world tilted sideways. The last thing she saw before her vision blurred was a pair of warm brown eyes rushing toward her, a stranger stepping forward, dropping his coffee cup, reaching out before she could collapse onto the pavement. And that moment changed everything. Emily expected to hit the cold pavement, but instead she felt someone's arms steadying her. A gentle but firm voice spoke near her ear. Hey, are you okay? Can you hear me?" She blinked slowly until her vision returned, and she saw a man kneeling beside her. Early 30s, dark hair, neatly trimmed beard, warm brown eyes filled not with pity, but concern. "My name's Daniel Brooks," he said softly. "You're shaking. Please sit down for a moment." He helped her back to the bench. His tone wasn't intrusive, but sincere, the kind of kindness that doesn't shout, just shows up. Emily swallowed hard, embarrassed. She hated being seen like this. "I'm fine," she whispered, though she clearly wasn't. Her voice trembled, just dizzy. Daniel looked at her empty hands, her worn coat, the exhaustion beneath her eyes, the kind people carry when they've been fighting too long with no break. "When was the last time you ate?" he asked gently. She looked away. Silence answered for her. Without another word, he stood up, jogged across the street to a food truck parked near the sidewalk, the smell of grilled sandwiches and warm soup floating in the cold morning air, and returned holding a paper bag and a steaming cup of hot cocoa. "You don't have to do this," Emily said quietly. "I know," Daniel replied, sitting beside her. "But I want to." The warmth of the drink made her hands tremble even more, hunger and relief mixing painfully inside her chest. She tried to sip slowly, but her throat ached with need. They sat in silence for nearly a minute, the breeze rustling the leaves above them, cars rushing past, a distant ferry horn echoing across the water. Daniel didn't ask invasive questions. He didn't push. He simply waited, present, unhurried. Finally, with a tiny, shaky voice, Emily said, I don't have a home anymore." She expected judgment, or a stiff awkward silence. But Daniel simply nodded, as if homelessness wasn't her identity, only a condition she was surviving. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "You must be exhausted." That gentleness nearly shattered her. For months, she had been invisible, reduced to statistics, brushed aside by people who didn't want to feel uncomfortable. Yet here was a stranger who didn't look away. A bus roared to a stop in front of them, releasing a puff of air and a wave of noise. Passengers rushed out, but neither of them moved. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel like she had to keep running. "Do you have somewhere safe to go tonight?" he asked. Her throat closed. She shook her head. Daniel hesitated only briefly, not unsure of helping, but careful with her dignity. "My sister runs a small community shelter a few blocks from here," he said. "It's clean, safe, and private. Only 6 women at a time. Would you be willing to go with me?" Emily stared at him, half fearful, half hopeful, because kindness had become so rare she almost didn't recognize it anymore. "What if it's just temporary?" she asked, her voice splintering. "Then I'll help you find something better after," Daniel replied. "You don't have to go through this alone." The wind picked up, scattering golden leaves across the pavement like tiny miracles, and for the first time in a long stretch of hard days, Emily felt the faintest flicker of hope, small, fragile, but alive. She nodded slowly, and just like that, one decision, and one stranger, began altering the course of her entire world. The walk toward the shelter was gentle and quiet. They passed beneath tall maple trees lining the street, golden sunlight pushing through their leaves like soft lanterns. A few cyclists coasted by, and a line of cars stretched slowly toward the next signal, engines humming steadily, life unfolding in different rhythms all around them. Emily kept her eyes low as they crossed into a quieter neighborhood. Small cafes with flower pots in their windows, wooden porches covered with ivy, and the faint distant sound of a street musician playing guitar filled the afternoon air. Everything looked peaceful, the kind of peace she had long forgotten how to feel. When they reached the small, home-style shelter, Daniel paused before opening the door. "You can breathe here," he told her gently. "No judgment, no pressure, just rest." Inside, the shelter smelled faintly of lavender and clean laundry. A soft lamp glowed warmly near the window, and a tall woman with her hair tied in a loose bun walked over to greet them. "This is my sister," Daniel said. "Rachel Brooks." Rachel smiled warmly. "Welcome, sweetheart. You look like you've been carrying the whole world alone." Emily tried to respond, but her throat tightened again. She simply nodded. Rachel led her to a small private room with a clean bed, warm blankets, and a little side table covered with wildflowers in a simple glass jar. Small, quiet beauty. When the door closed behind her, Emily sat on the edge of the bed and exhaled, as if a weight she never spoke about had finally loosened. Hours passed quietly. She slept, really slept, for the first time in days. By evening, she woke to a soft knock on the door. Daniel was waiting outside with a gentle smile and 2 warm cups of soup from a nearby diner. They sat in the common room, near a wide window facing the park. A soft drizzle painted the skyline, the Seattle buildings glowing behind the mist like a watercolor. "You don't have to tell me anything," Daniel said, "but if you ever want to, I'm here." Silence lingered. Then slowly, as if a dam cracked open from inside, Emily began to speak. She told him how her parents died when she was young. How she worked 2 jobs while studying. How she trusted someone she loved deeply, a boyfriend who controlled her finances, emptied her savings, and disappeared when everything fell apart. She described the slow unraveling of her life, first losing her stability, then losing her confidence, then losing the belief that anyone would ever care. Tears traced down her cheeks, but she kept speaking, not because she wanted to, but because the truth had been locked inside her too long. When she finally fell quiet, shaking from the weight of her own story, she whispered, "Every time I thought I was getting back up, something else pushed me down." Daniel's eyes softened. "I know it doesn't feel like it right now," he said quietly, "but this isn't where your story ends. There's still more ahead than behind." She looked at him, unsure whether she believed that, and just as she found a moment of fragile safety, a new challenge surfaced. The next morning, Rachel came in with concern written across her face. "The city funding is being cut again," she said in a low tone. They might close the shelter if we can't raise enough support. Emily froze. The first place that had felt safe in months might disappear too. Fear rushed back into her chest like a wave crashing over shore. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "We'll figure something out," he said, but even he sounded uncertain. Emily's heart pounded. She had just begun to hope, and life was already threatening to take that hope away again. The day her life turned toward the light, the fear of losing the shelter again stirred something inside Emily, something she thought was gone forever, a willingness to fight for herself again. She couldn't go back to sidewalks and cold bus stops. Not now, not after feeling safe, even briefly. That afternoon, she sat by the window, watching cars move slowly through the rain-washed road. A city bus splashed through a puddle and rolled past, its windows fogged, its passengers warm inside, each one with a story. She whispered to herself, "Greater than, I want to belong somewhere again." When Daniel returned that evening, he found her not crying, but thinking. If I can help somehow," she said quietly, "I want to." He smiled at her courage. "You already are," he replied. "You're proof of why this place matters." The next few days brought a shift, not just around her, but inside her. She helped Rachel serve meals, straighten the bedrooms, and talk with the other women. She began listening the way Daniel once listened to her, and with each small act of care, her spirit stitched itself slowly back together. Then one evening, Daniel came rushing back into the shelter, rain dripping from his jacket butt, hope blazing in his eyes. "I spoke with my old coach," he said breathlessly. "There's a fundraising drive next weekend at the community center. They agreed to highlight the shelter as one of the causes, and they need a speaker. Someone with a real story. Someone who can reach hearts." Emily froze. A speaker. Her instinct was to retreat, to shrink back into invisibility. But Daniel looked at her with quiet certainty. "You don't have to impress anyone. Just tell the truth. The truth is powerful enough." For the first time, she didn't say, "I can't." She only said, "I'll try." The night of the event. The hall was warm with soft lights, rows of people seated, hopeful faces turned toward the small stage. Seattle's skyline twinkled through the tall glass windows behind them like distant stars. When they called her name, Emily Carter, her hands trembled as she walked forward. She began with a whisper. "My life didn't fall apart all at once, it cracked in silence," she said. "And by the time I realized I was drowning, I was already underwater." The room leaned in, listening. She told them not just about hardship, but about being invisible. About how heavy loneliness becomes when there is no witness to your pain. And finally, she said, "One stranger didn't rescue me, he saw me. And that changed everything." When her voice broke, people wiped their eyes. When she finished, the hall erupted in applause, not because she was broken, but because she was rising. By the end of the night, the shelter received more support than they had expected, enough funding for a full year. Volunteers signed up, donors reached out, and something far more important happened. Emily got job offers, real ones. People heard her strength, not her struggle. Weeks later, she stood again in that same park where her journey began, not homeless, not lost, but alive with purpose. The sky was golden at sunset, children laughed on the grass, buses rumbled past, and she smiled. Because the world was no longer passing her by. She was part of it again. Final heart-touching message. Sometimes, it only takes one kind stranger. One person who pauses, listens, and refuses to let someone disappear into silence. To change a whole world in a single day. Speech balloon. Dear viewers, if this story touched your heart, please comment below and tell us which moment moved you the most. Thumbs up. Don't forget to like this video. Repeat button. Share it with your friends. Pushpin and kindly subscribe to our channel. Kindness quest to spread more real hope and humanity in this world.